we talked about spending the Arizona Diamondbacks money, so now we're going to go crazy and spend all of it on one guy, most likely, because that's probably what it's going to take. But we do have some starting pitchers here that we want to take a look at as potential free agent targets for the Snakes. And the first one is potentially one of my favorites. And that's Marcus Stroman, we'll say this for now, former Chicago Cubs starting pitcher. And let's take a look at his numbers from this season, because Stroman was, once again, another Cy Young candidate that, much like Zach Gallen, kind of, not going to say fell off, had a little bit of a tougher second half of the season, but still was one of the best pitchers in the National League.
He was fantastic through July 15th. On July 15th, Marcus Stroman looked like he might go win the NL Cy Young. He had a 2.88 ERA. He was 10-6. Everyone in Chicago was talking about Marcus Stroman winning the Cy Young Award, and not Justin Steele winning the Cy Young Award.
That is correct.
Although he was certainly having, a good year in his own right. Yeah, and then as you said, Marcus Stroman's second half was a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
So he, after July 15th, with those great numbers on July 15th, he had 3 starts after that were absolutely abysmal. He went 10 innings total in 3 starts. He's basically going 3 innings every time. He gave up 17 earned runs on 22 hits in those 3 starts, and ERA up over 15. So those kind of tanked his numbers a little bit. And then it was revealed that he had a hip injury, and he was placed on the injured list. And the initial word was that Marcus Stroman was out for the season.
Yeah.
We did not expect to see Marcus Stroman for the rest of the year, at which time many Diamondbacks fans, breathed out a collective sigh of relief, because they were very much in contention with the Cubs. The Cubs don't have Marcus Stroman for the rest of the year. That's good news. And then Marcus Stroman comes back and pitches not as a starter, although I think he might have opened a game or 2 for them. Yeah. But he was really pitching.
It was 8 innings total.
Yeah, 8 innings altogether out of the bullpen. I think this is 3 or 4 appearances. And he wasn't great. He had a 5.63 ERA in those 8 innings. I believe the velo was down a little bit. Didn't look like at all the same pitcher from the first half. And yet at the end of the season, he still turned down, I believe, what was a $20 million, something like that, about a $20 million option that he had with the Cubs. So he still, after that disaster of a second half, was still willing to bet on himself in free agency. And it makes him a really interesting, I don't know what Marcus Stroman is going to get paid.
Yeah.
I really have no idea.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that there is something to be said about, the right hip inflammation, right? Pitchers are a creature of habit. It's very difficult to pitch when your mechanics are affected by an injury, by something that's kind of a nagging injury like that.
You'd like to believe that was affecting those 3 starts prior.
When you have a 15.63 ERA over 3 starts. Yeah, no, I mean, and based on his performance in the first half and overall, I mean, we are talking about a guy that probably, like you said, he did turn down the deal from the Cubs, but he probably lost a considerable amount of money of what he was going to make this offseason with that second half. His overall numbers still pretty damn good. 136.2 innings pitched, 3.95 ERA, a 1.26 whip, 20.7% strikeout, 9% walk rate, and then a 3.58 whip. But those numbers, like you said, a big jump from his 2.88 ERA that he was as of July 15th. Yeah. Now, I still believe, based on that injury, that's the pitcher he was more than he was in the second half. Even coming out of the bullpen, we've talked about it. I've talked about it probably a million times, but let's be honest. It takes a while for you to ramp back up and get back to being who you are as a pitcher whenever you take time off. The biggest problem here is the Cubs were in a battle for a playoff position, and there was probably a sense of urgency to have him back in some form earlier than they were anticipating on him.
They weren't even anticipating him to come back. That's what made it so weird. Is all of a sudden Marcus Stroman shows up, and it's all right, I guess he could pitch out of the bullpen.
That's the thing is and of course you still didn't know what you were going to get out of him, and you didn't get the best version of him, obviously, but you were desperate. You know what I mean? And if one of your best pitchers is making his way back and is saying that he feels like he can come back and help the team in any capacity, and honestly is willing to accept that role out of the bullpen, right? That's kind of a telling, thing about him as a pitcher, that he's willing to do that, because not a lot of starters, especially a guy that's going into, a free agency offseason potentially, is willing to come out of the bullpen and maybe not perform well, which can impact, what he's going to receive.
They probably would have had to stretch him out. So I guess logistically, if they wanted to get Marcus Stroman back into some games, the best way was to just have him pitch out of the bullpen.
Sure.
But
a lot of guys could turn that down. Like, that's not something that most not all starting pitchers are going to be willing to accept that kind of role and do that. Like, they're just going to say, well, it is what it is. If I can't get stretched out in time, I'm not going to be back.
You probably don't want to give Marcus Stroman like $20 million a year for 3 seasons if you expect him to be a reliever. I don't think anyone expects him to be a reliever moving forward. But there are some big questions about, like, was this all just the injury that happened? Is that why he was so ineffective in the second half of the season? Or, Stroman's 32 years old, right? He's getting up there a little bit. He obviously doesn't have the size that you're typically used to seeing from a right-handed starter. Fangraphs, they're crowdsourcing. They have 3 years, $66 million. That's their estimate for Marcus Stroman, which, yes, I acknowledge that's $22 million a year, which is more than we just said the Diamondbacks had to spend this offseason. It was interesting. In Nick's story, he mentioned Blake Snell and Marcus Stroman. He still mentioned some names as guys, those types of names as guys that it would make sense for the D-backs to pursue. He wasn't necessarily implying that they would be able to land any of those guys.
Sure.
But with Stroman, I'm skeptical of the 3 years, $66 million, to be totally honest. I think that if you have that disastrous of a second half where you're hurt and just so ineffective, it's hard for me to believe that guy is still going to get $22 million a year for 3 seasons. I think it's possible the Diamondbacks could get him for a little bit less than that. But yes, even so, he would take a significant chunk of what you had to spend this offseason no matter what. So, maybe there's a way to backload it somehow, like we said earlier. But Stroman is about the highest tier of starting pitcher that I could possibly imagine the Diamondbacks landing, given what we now know about their spending.
Their spending, for sure.
Yeah.
And even then, he might still cost too much and might not be worth the investment risk this point.
Yeah.
Another guy that we are very familiar with and could maybe make some more sense financially is none other than former Arizona Diamondback Wade Miley, the 37-year-old GOAT himself. Wade Miley was on the Milwaukee Brewers and had himself a fairly decent season up there in Milwaukee. Let's take a look at his numbers this year. He pitched 120 and a third innings. He had a 3.14 ERA with a 1.14 WHIP, 16.1% strikeout rate, 7.8% walk rate, and a 4.69 FIP, which not great there. Not great. Not great there at the end. But that 3.14 ERA, again, like we talked about yesterday with Seth Lugo, like we talked about with Michael Wacha, these are things that, especially right now, if you're talking about leaving Brandon Pfaadt potentially in the third spot in the rotation, I don't hate out of a fourth or fifth guy in the starting rotation. I just think that the Diamondbacks, if they're going to go after a guy like Wade, they're going to need like 2 Wades, is what I feel like, in order for them to fill out the rotation. Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. Wade Miley is not the most durable guy out there. He threw 37 innings in 2022. He, as you said, threw 120 and a third in 2023. So, yeah, there are some pretty significant durability questions there. You can't sign Wade Miley and expect to get 180 innings or something like that. It's just not realistic. And he had a bunch of injuries last year, too. Yeah, he had time off, at least, for injuries. Nothing major, but just kind of nagging injuries. He didn't miss a ton of time with them, but yeah, he did have a lat injury and an elbow injury in 2023. So shoulder and elbow. That's not exactly what you're the ideal injuries for a pitcher to have. The man's 37 years old. He also had hip discomfort and back discomfort. Yeah, everything. Feet discomfort. I can speak from that. You have to have just mad respect that Wade Miley has managed to be this effective, this deep. And he's 37 years old. The fact that he still had a 3.14 ERA in over 120 innings. Yeah. It's really impressive. He is really good at limiting hard contact still. He was in the 93rd percentile in hard hit rate this season. So that's something that FIP wouldn't take into account. So, maybe that 4.69 is a little bit misleading. But yeah, the peripherals do not at all support Wade Miley continuing forward with like a low 3 ERA. There's just not really enough swing and miss there at this point. So I wouldn't expect him to repeat the season that he had necessarily, but
with how much money the Diamondbacks have to spend, Fangraphs has 1 year, $8 million on Wade Miley. That would be really reasonable.
That's
that would
value.
absolutely
That's
fit.
value.
Yeah.
I'll take that. Michael said, here's the thing, guys. The D-backs don't necessarily need an ace. They just need guys who won't suck.
Very
Think
true.
of how many starts Davies and Mad Bum got last year.
Yes.
You're absolutely right. Mad Bum didn't get nearly as many starts as most people would believe. And Zach Davies, four. And Zach Davies was actually was the team ace for at least a week at one point. So
the first turn through the rotation, Zach Davies is better than everyone else.
That's right.
Rest of the season, not so great for Zach Davies.
Not so much. But yeah, you're right. And the Diamondbacks were able to win 84 games with basically Zach Allen and Merrill Kelly doing the majority of the work most of the days. Brandon Pfaadt learning how to become a big leaguer. Where
Brandon Pfaadt wasn't good in the regular season.
That's what I mean. I mean, he was sent down. We talked obviously about the Strom conversation when he was down during the All-Star break. That right there just showed where he was at the midpoint of this season. So
he was much better in the second half. He had like a low 4 ERA in the second half of the season.
But he was still figuring things out and adapting from the minor leagues to the major leagues, and then became just the absolute stud that he became in the postseason, right? And hopefully that carries over to him continuing to perform like that next season. If he is able to do that, then like Michael said, there's your number 3 guy. Again, you're really just looking for a 4 and 5 guy, and that could really be Wade Miley when it comes to especially a 1 year, $8 million deal.
So if I told you that the D-backs rotation on opening day is Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, we'll put Wade Miley in the 3 spot, Brandon Pfaadt, Tommy Henry. How do you feel about that?
I don't feel great.
Don't feel great.
I hate this episode.
I know. I know. It's all dejection. It's all just sadness. So maybe Wade Miley at 5, Brandon Pfaadt at 4, maybe a Seth Lugo at 3.
See, but okay, if Lugo's 13 million and Wade Miley's 8 million,
I can do math, Jesse. That's 21 million. All right, I get it. We'll start a GoFundMe. Can
you backload a contract with Wade Miley? Just say, all right, we'll pay you 1 million this year, and then we'll pay you $500K every year for 20 years.
Yeah. I'd take that if I was Wade. It's the end of my career. I'm gonna get that $500,000 paycheck on Barry Bonds Day every year. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good.
I don't think that would be a terrible rotation. It would be better than the rotation that the Diamondbacks had this past season, given the expected improvements from Pfaadt. Tommy Henry missed most of the second half, but was a pretty decent starter for this team.
Yeah.
Wade Miley had a low 3 ERA this last year. I don't really expect that again, but there'd be a lot more stability there than what they had this past season. But yeah, I mean, in a 7-game postseason series, do you feel great about Wade Miley and Brandon Pfaadt? And it's still not an ideal situation.
We have disappointed known baseball GM Elise. She says, I also hate this episode, Damon. Sorry, I thought you would love it. Like, we tailored it for you. We thought we were going to talk numbers and business, and we thought you would be all about it, Elise.
I'm sitting here just totally dejected because all I can think about is how we just went to the World Series and we're talking about the same topics that Patrick Lyons at DNVR Rockies is talking about right now.
Like Wade Miley?
Wade Miley on a 1-year deal, kind of round out the middle of the rotation. We went to the World Series.
Yeah, that means we're a good team and we're fairly complete. They just need a couple more pieces. That's how they see it. No, I'm with you. There's a lot of money floating around. Let's spend some money.